In this presentation, we look at Inventions, a special type of piece written by J.S. Bach to help teach the playing and composing of two-voice counterpoint. Inventions, as I just mentioned, were two-part imitative works composed by Bach in the Lutheran tradition of the bikinnium, two-voice teaching pieces. These pieces were primarily for pedagogical use, teaching his children and students how to cultivate proper keyboard technique, as well as understanding the idiomatic architecture of imitative forms. Inventions were typically divided into three areas or events: the exposition, a modulatory section often referred to as the development, and then finally a tonal return to the original key. If you're familiar with the concept of sonata allegro form, you may notice some similarities in the titles of some of these sections, but you should note that their specific functions in these two different forms differ from each other. So an exposition and a development work differently in inventions and fugues than they do in sonatas. The exposition was the most ritualized area of the invention, meaning that it has the most requirements to fulfill. This area included a statement of the subject material. The subject, or the initial melody, would appear in one voice and then be imitated in the other voice, either at the interval of the fifth or the octave. Material that consistently appears against the subject is frequently known as the counter-subject. Then we move on to the development or modulatory section. Once all voices have introduced the subject, we typically move to this development or modulatory section. This includes alternating episodes and middle entries. Episodes, which we'll abbreviate as EP, are free sections and frequently modulate via sequential motion or freely develop motivic material derived from the subject. Middle entries are entrances of the subject material prior to the reintroduction of the home key. Thus, these entrances will be transposed to a new key. Sometimes we will see that middle entries will be ever so slightly altered. That's just the natural process of developing in the modulatory section. And a middle entry only requires one subject to enter in order for it to be titled as such. If multiple subjects enter, it can be deemed a middle entry group, or MEG. Episodes and middle entries typically alternate and, in formal analyses, are abbreviated and numbered. So we'd go episode 1, middle entry 1. Episode 2, middle entry 2. And there can be as many episodes and middle entries as the composer desires. Finally, we get to a tonal return or the final entry. This is more an event than a section, but the tonal return is the return to the home key. This is frequently a dramatic event emphasized by a cadence. And sometimes there will be one or more final entries or final entry groups following the tonal return. Lastly, a coda may also occur at the end of the work, typically articulated by a cadence and then bringing the work to a close. So here is an analysis of the overall form. First, we begin with the exposition, which has the entrance of the subject in all voices and emphasizes the tonic. Then we go to the development section, or developmental or modulatory section. We'll have an episode which tends to modulate, a middle entry with at least one subject statement, then episode 2 which will tend to modulate, then middle entry 2 with at least one subject statement. This can repeat over and over again, and we go to different keys, the dominant, the relative major or minor. We go back and forth and explore these different key areas. Finally, we'll get to a tonal return, this return to the home key, and the possible final entry of the subject.